Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Rama
Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. We welcome you to this morning's Srimad Bhagavatam class. This morning we will be hearing from and discussing from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 15, verse number 11. And the title of the chapter is The Pandavas Retire Timely. This morning's class will be given by Her Grace Vrindavaneswari Radhika Mataji from ISKCON, Philadelphia. Thank you, Mataji. We welcome you to the call. And whenever you are ready, we can start the class.
Hare Krishna. Good morning, everybody. Sorry, my voice is a little froggy today. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giravaradari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Giravaradari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giravaradari Shodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Astatara Sata His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Astatara Sata His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakota Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai ISKCON founder Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadar Shiva Sati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Gita Govardhan Ki Jai Mayapurdam Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Jamuna Devi Ki Jai Ganga Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai ISKCON Harrisburg Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Pramanande Hari Bol All glories the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, Hare Hare Bol. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminati Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravana Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashatate Shatarane. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskrita Naram Chaiva Narottama Devam Sarasvatim Vyasham Shatutayar Madhurya Nasta Prayashu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamashloki Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. So, good morning, everyone. I'm going to read from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 15, Verse 11. So this is a little bit of a longer shloka to recite, but we'll do it together. I'll chant it 3 times, and then we can all take turns. Yono yugopa venaita durante krishad dervashasha richatad ayutagra bugyaya zakana shistam upayayujad satya trilokim triptam amnestita salile vigmadna sangaha. Yono yugopavana atya duranta krichad dervashasha richatad ayutagra bugya Sakana Shistam Upayuga Ya Yatastrilokim Triptamamashta Salila Le Vigmagna Sangha Yono Yugopa Vanaeta Duranta Krichad Dervasha Sori Richatad Ayutagra Bugya Sakana Shistam Upayad Yukta Yakta Strilokim Triptam Anmam Stad Yasalile Vinad Magya Sangha. So would anyone else like to give that a shot?
Hare Krishna. Yona Jugopavan Etya Duranta Krachrad Durvasaso Ari Rachitad Ayutagra Bhugaha Yaha Shakanna Shishtam Upayuja Yatastrilokim Viptam Amamsta Salile Vinimagna Sangha.
Great, everyone. Anyone else? Pariksha Prabhu?
Gupta Vana Etya Duranta Kritan Duvava Sori Rachitan Atyutagra Bukya. Trying to read my cell phone. That's Sakana System Apayuja Yatastri Lokim Tivtan Amam Stam Sadhane Vinimagna Sangha. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. One more person?
Gopavana Etya Duranta Krichrad Darvasa Suari Rachitad Ayutagra Bhogyaha Shakanna Shishtam Upayujya Yatastrilokim Triptamamamsta Salile Vinimagna Sangraha.
Nitya Gopal Prabhu, go ahead.
Try. Yona Jagopo Vana Ete Durante Kruchad Durvasa Sori Rachitta Diyutagra Bhugayaha Shakanna Shista Mupayujya Yatra Srilokim Trupta Mamasta Salile Vinimagna Sangha.
Hare Krishna. Anyone else? Okay. So we'll do word for word translation. Ya, one who, na, us, Yugopa, gave protection, Vane, forest, Etya, getting in, Duranta, dangerously, Krichrat, trouble, Durvashashaha, of Durvasha Muni, Ari, enemy, Richatat, fabricated by, Ayuta, 10,000, Agrabuk, one who eats before, Ya, that person, Shaka Ana Shishtam, remnants of foodstuff, Upayuhya, having accepted, Yataha, because, Trilokim, all the 3 worlds, Triptam, satisfied. Amamshta, thought within the mind. Salile, while in the water. Vinimagna Sangha, all merged into the water. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. During our exile, Durvasa Muni, who eats with his 10,000 disciples, intrigued with our enemies to put us in dangerous trouble. At that time, he, Lord Krishna, simply by accepting the remnants of food, saved us. By his accepting food, thus, the assembly of Munis, while bathing in the river, felt sumptuously fed, and all the three worlds were also satisfied. Purport, Durvasa Muni, a powerful mystic Brahmana determined to observe the principles of religion with great vows and under strict austerities. His name is associated with many historical events, and it appears that the great mystic could be both easily satisfied and easily annoyed, like Lord Shiva. When he was satisfied, he could do tremendous good to the servitor, but if he was dissatisfied, he could bring about the greatest calamity. Kumari Kunti, at her father's house, used to minister all kinds of services to all great brahmanas. And being satisfied with her good reception, Durvasa Muni benedicted her with the power to call any demigod she desired. It is understood that he was a plenary incarnation of Lord Shiva, and thus he could either be satisfied or annoyed. He was a great devotee of Lord Shiva, and by Lord Shiva's order, he accepted the priesthood of King Ketu because of the king's performance of sacrifice for 100 years. Sometimes he used to visit the parliamentary assembly of the heavenly kingdom of Indradev. He could travel in space by his great mystic powers, and it is understood that he traveled a great distance through space, even up to the Vaikuntha planets beyond material space. He traveled all these long distances within 1 year during his quarrel with King Ambarish, the great devotee and emperor of the world. He had about 10,000 disciples, and wherever he visited and became a guest of the great Kshatriya kings, he used to be accompanied by a number of followers. Once he visited the house of Duryodhana, the enemy cousin of Maharaj Yudhisthira. Duryodhana was intelligent enough to satisfy the Brahmana by all means, and the great Rishi wanted to give some benediction to Duryodhana. Duryodhana knew his mystic powers, and he knew also that the mystic Brahmana, if dissatisfied, could cause some havoc, and thus he designed to engage the Brahmana to show his wrath upon his enemy cousins, the Pandavas. When the Rishi wanted to award some benediction to Duryodhana, the latter wished that he should visit the house of Maharaj Yudhisthira, who was the eldest and chief among all his cousins. But by his request, he would go to him after he had finished his meals with his queen, Draupadi. Duryodhana knew that after Draupadi's dinner, it was impossible for Maharaj Yudhisthira to receive such a large number of Brahmana guests, and thus the Rishi would be annoyed and would create some trouble for his cousin Maharaj Yudhisthira. That was the plan of Duryodhana. Durvasa Muni agreed to his proposal, and he approached the king in exile according to the plan of Duryodhana, after the king and Draupadi had finished their meals. On his arrival at the door of Maharaj Yudhisthira, he was at once well received, and the king requested him to finish his noontime religious rites in the river, for by the time the foodstuff would be prepared. Durvasa Muni, along with his large number of disciples, went to take a bath in the river, and Maharaj Yudhisthira was in great anxiety about the guests. As long as Draupadi had not taken her meals, food could be served to any number of guests. But the Rishi, by the plan of Duryodhana, reached there after Draupadi had finished her meals. When the devotees are put into difficulty, they have an opportunity to recollect the Lord with rapt attention. So Draupadi was thinking of Lord Krishna in that dangerous position, and the all-pervading Lord could at once know the dangerous position of his devotees. He therefore came there on the scene and asked Draupadi to give whatever food she might have in her stock. On her being so requested by the Lord, Draupadi was sorrowful because the Supreme Lord asked her for some food and she was unable to supply it at that time. She said to the Lord that the mysterious dish which she had received from the sun god could supply any amount of food if she herself had not eaten, but on that day she had already taken her meals and thus they were in danger. By expressing her difficulty, she began to cry before the Lord, as only one would do in such a position. The Lord, however, asked Draupadi to bring up the cooking pots to see if there was any particle of foodstuff left. And on Draupadi's doing so, the Lord found some particle of vegetable sticking to the pot. The Lord at once picked it up and ate it. After doing so, the Lord asked Draupadi to call for her guest to the company of Durvasa. Bhima was sent to call for them from the river, Bhima said, "Why are you delaying us, sirs? Come on, the food is ready for you." But the Brahmanas, because of the Lord's accepting a little particle of food, felt sumptuously fed, even while they were in the water. They thought that since Maharaj Yudhisthira must have prepared many valuable dishes for them, and since they were not hungry and could not eat, the king would feel very sorry, so it was better not to go there. Thus, they decided to go away. This incident proves that the Lord is the greatest mystic, and therefore he's known as Yogeshwar. Another instruction is that every householder must offer food to the Lord, and the result will be that everyone, even a company of guests, numbering 10,000, will be satisfied because the Lord's being satisfied. That is the way of devotional service. Om Jnana Timaranjana Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilatamina Tashme Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadara Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Nama Om Vishnu Vidaya Krishna Prasad Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Chara Swaminiti Namane Snigta Chaita Surpaneta Vagmanam Charasa Plutam Prabhupada Gata Prananam Bhakti Chara Padam. So I'll go back and read the translation again. This is a very well-known story about Durvasa Muni. During our exile, Durvasa Muni, who eats with his 10,000 disciples, intrigued with our enemies to put us in dangerous trouble. At that time, he, Lord Krishna, simply by accepting the remnants of food, saved us. By his accepting food, thus the assembly of Munis, while bathing in the river, felt sumptuously fed, and all the three worlds were also satisfied. So in this particular chapter, we are seeing all of the ways that that Lord Krishna has helped the Pandavas. We're seeing all of his glories, the benedictions he's provided, and this is again no different from all those other examples. Durvasa Muni was, he was a Muni, but he was a little bit of a rascal too. He would definitely get very easily agitated. And he believed very much in having things exactly done according to ritual. And so by this intensity, by this rigidity, you could say, he would oftentimes create situations. And the situation that came up with Maharaj, with also Maharaj Ambarish, is also referenced in this chapter, in this purport by Prabhupada. And the story with Maharaj Ambarish is that the Muni, Durvasa Muni, came to visit him on a fast day. It was it was the day after the fast day on Dwadasi. So we all know Dwadasi, right? Those of us that are following the Ekadasi Dwadasi fasting schedule, there's a set window for the fast to be broken, and we get those sent out. It's according to the phases of the moon and the sunrise and all of these different kind of astrological calculations. And so there's a specific time to break fast, and there's a deadline really to break fast by the end of that certain time frame. So Maharaj Ambarish was a very pious king. Everything he did was for the Lord. Every step he took was going toward the temple. He, used the water to bathe the deities. He used his eyes to gaze upon the Lord. He used his mouth to glorify the Lord and to sing about the Lord. So Maharaj Ambarish was a very pious king and a very pious devotee of the Lord. So knowing that Durvasa Muni was coming, or Durvasa Muni came during this morning of Dwadasi, and they hadn't broken fast yet, Maharaj Ambarish said, "Okay, no problem. When you come back, we'll feed you." And so Durvasa Muni said, "Okay, but in order to carry out my proper Brahminical processes, I have to go to the river and wash and do my meditations for the morning." So Durvasa Muni goes off. He goes to the river. He falls into deep meditation, completely loses track of time. Meanwhile, Maharaj Ambarish is in absolute distress because the time is coming where he has to break his Dwadasi, or break his Ekadasi fast on Dwadasi. And he's becoming very agitated, knowing that when a Brahmana comes, when a great Brahmana like Durvasa Muni comes, you must always feed them first. You can't take any kind of drink or take any kind of food before the Brahmin. So he consults another one of his Brahmins that's from his court. And he says, what shall I do? I need to break fast, because this is another component of fasting, is that when you take the Ekadasi fast, you have to break it at that certain time to properly follow the fasting rituals. And so he and the Brahmin, the court Brahmin, agree that taking just a small sip of water is breaking fast, but not breaking fast, taking food, but not taking food. So we're kind of sitting in that middle zone there. And so the king agrees. King Ambarish agrees. He said, okay, this is proper. There should be no issue with Durvasa Muni. He's coming back after the breaking fast time. If I just take a small sip of water, I will have been able to observe the break fast time, but not break the rules of feeding the Brahmana first. So, of course, Durvasa Muni, being a very advanced sage, knows instantly, he's in his meditation, and he instantly knows that Maharaj Ambarish has broken his fast, and that he has eaten before feeding him. And so, because Durvasa is who he is, and he's easily annoyed, as is pointed out in the purport today, he's very easily annoyed. He comes back and he is angry. He's hopping mad. And so, and it says, and it even just says here that in the text, it says, still hungry, Durvasa Muni, his body trembling, his face curved, and his eyebrows crooked in a frown, angrily spoke as follows to King Ambarish, who stood before him with folded hands. And he says, this is what what Durvasa Muni is saying. He's like, alas, just see the behavior of this cruel man. He is not a devotee of Lord Vishnu. Being proud of his material opulence and his position, he considered himself God. Just see how he has transgressed the laws of religion. Maharaj Ambarish, you have invited me to eat as a guest, but instead of feeding me, you yourself have eaten first. Because of your misbehavior, I shall show you something to punish you. And so, as Durvasa Muni said this, his face became red with anger. Uprooting a bunch of hair from his head, he created a demon resembling a blazing fire of devastation to punish Maharaj Ambarish. Taking a trident in his hand and making the surface of the earth tremble with his footsteps, that blazing creature came before Maharaj Ambarish. But the king, upon seeing him, was not at all disturbed and did not move even slightly from his position. So you can see here that Durvasa Muni is easily perturbed. B, he has some power behind him, right? So he's done the austerities, he's done his work, he's got some potency behind him. So what's a king to do? He's in quite a predicament here, as are the Pandavas. And it seems that Durvasa Muni seems to take some pleasure in all of this, really putting these great personalities in some discomfort. And of course, we know this is all also, everything is under the direction and oversight of the Lord. So, these pastimes are being carried out for some reason. But both of these pastimes illustrate something, and I'll finish the story with Maharaj Ambarish. So Maharaj Ambarish he just stood there. He just stood there, and he just was going to accept it. He knew that there was a risk that the behavior that what he did might not work. So he knew he's going into this knowing there's a risk. He knows about Durvasa Muni. Everyone knows Durvasa Muni. Everyone knows how he is. So what happens is Maharaj Ambarish just stands there, but the Supreme Personality of Godhead gets involved, and he sees what's happening, and he knows that Maharaj Ambarish is a great follower. He's a great devotee, and that there was no offense that was intended, Maharaj Ambarish was in a predicament. He was in quite the pickle, and he didn't, he was stuck. What was he going to do? So Supreme Personality of Godhead came out, and he threw his chakra at Durvasa Muni. And Durvasa Muni ran and ran and ran. And this is where in this particular purport for today, where it says he traveled through the universe for a year to the different planets. This is because he was getting chased by the chakra of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the Supreme Personality of Godhead was going to protect his devotee no matter what. And in the same situation here for today, we see the Supreme Personality of Godhead was going to protect his devotee. And this is a really, these two stories, well, they have these extreme sides of things. They had a little bit of comic effect to them too, with just, you can imagine just Durvasa, Muni showing up with his 10,000 disciples, and they want to eat, and suddenly they're bathing in the river and they're just all full, or Durvasa Muni showing up from his bath at Maharaj Ambarisha's house and, going to curse Maharaj Ambarish, and Krishna steps in, the Supreme Personality of Godhead steps in and throws a chakra at him and chases them all over the place. So, it's you can imagine this almost comedic in play happening, but it's a beautiful illustration of how Krishna just steps in and is like, not with my devotee. Krishna's there. He's there to protect his devotees. And in the nectar of devotion, there are qualities that are described of the Lord. 64 different qualities that are expressed in nectar of devotion of the Lord. And one of the qualities that for these stories that comes up is this all cognizant quality of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the all cognizant quality is that it's all cognizant means any person who can understand the feelings of all persons and incidents in all places at all times. And this is all cognizant. And so this story is given as an example in the Nectar of Devotion as well, because it shows how Krishna is always aware of what his devotees are going through. He's aware of everything, he's aware of not just the devotees, but of the demons, of everything. So Krishna is all cognizant. He is ever present, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, right? These are all words that can be used to describe the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Why? Well, because his energies they're part and parcel of his energies in all of us. Every living entity has Krishna's energies in them. We have that tiny spark, that Atma, with the Paramatma. So we have Paramatma, which is that connection to the Lord. This is Narayan, Chaitya Guru. Paramatma is that super soul, the guiding force. Then we have our own soul, our own Atma, which is also a minute, tiny spark of the Lord. So how could the Lord not know everything going on? Nothing occurs, not a blade of grass moves without the knowledge of the Lord. And we can see that. We can see the evidence of that. And so it's really, by his all cognizant quality, he understood that the Pandavas were in danger. And they were facing the wrath of Durvasa Muni. And he also knew that Duryodhana had sent Durvasa Muni. He knew that the situation was because of the behavior of Duryodhana. So he went in and he saved his devotees. And by just the small, tiny offering to the Lord that Draupadi had, one small scraping of the pot, one tiny piece of vegetable that was on the, when you cook and you're cleaning up after a meal and you have that one piece of food stuck to the side of a pot, scrubbing it off. That's what Krishna took. That was all she had to offer him. And that was it. And he took that. And because it was offered with love from his devotee, it was fully satisfying, right? Patram pushpam phalam toyam. This is the all satisfying. You just offer him a leaf of flower, some water. It doesn't take much. This one tiny morsel of food was filled. It filled the Lord And it filled him not in a physiological sense of how could he possibly be full from a tiny morsel of food, a fleck of food, really. It wasn't truly that it was satisfying him on a physiological space, right? Because Krishna is spiritual anyway, but it satisfied him in his heart. It satisfied him because Draupadi offered this with complete surrender. It's like, Krishna, that's all I have. And he's like, I'll just take this tiny scrap. This is sufficient. But because all of the 10,000 brahmanas and Durvasa, they were all still devotees of the Lord. They were following Durvasa Muni, who was also, devotee of the Lord. But all of these brahmanas, because they were also still devotees of the Lord, they were Brahmins, they followed the religious principles, that they were also satisfied because Krishna deemed it so. Because Krishna was satisfied, they were satisfied. So this is, there's so many different ways that we can really take today's verse. I mean, the first is the fact that Krishna knows everything. He knew the distress of the Pandavas. He knew what Duryodhana was pulling too. In the other story with Maharaj Ambarish, he knew that Maharaj Ambarish was in danger, grave danger. And so he stepped in. He stepped in and took care of the situation and taught Durvasa Muni a lesson. And so here, we have this all-knowing, all-cognizant. He's such an Ananda Vigraha. He's always full of knowledge and he's eternal. He's always full of bliss. So all of these things, Krishna is always satisfied, but he's especially satisfied when he sees the offerings from his devotees. And so it's when I think about this, it was reminding me of the verse, the peace formula, which is a very, very well-known verse within Bhagavad Gita. And it's Bhagavad Gita 5:29, Bhoktaram Yagya Tapasham Sarva Loka Maheshwaram Surdam Sarva Bhutanam Nyatva Mam Santim Richati Santim, relief from material pangs. So Bhoktaram Yagya Tapasham, that the Supreme Lord is the beneficiary of all sacrifices and all austerities. So all of these sacrifices, all these austerities, that the Supreme Lord is the beneficiary. And he's also the Supreme Lord of all planets and demigods. So he's everywhere, right? So this is how he can be this all cognizant, because he's the Lord of everything. He knows everything that's happening everywhere. So we can understand that because he's the Supreme Lord over everything, over Sarva Bhutanam, right? Sarva Bhutanam, over all living entities. He is that. He's Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. He's the supreme controller. He oversees Sarva Loka, all Loka planets. He's overseeing all of these planets. Because of that, and we also know that he's the well-wisher. He's the eternal well-wisher of all of the living entities. And that this should give us some relief from our anxieties. And there's a lot of anxiety in the world. But knowing that Krishna is the benefactor, but also the well-wisher of all living entities can give us peace, that he's always out there for our best interest. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, the conditioned souls within the clutches of illusory energy are all anxious to attain peace in this material world. They do not know the formula for peace, which is explained here. The greatest peace formula is simply that the Krishna is the beneficiary in all human activities. Men should offer everything to the transcendental service of the Lord because he is the proprietor of all planets and the demigods. No one is greater than he. And so because of the offerings made repeatedly by Maharaj Ambarish, because the Draupadi and the Pandavas were just, everything was for the Lord. Everything was done for the pleasure of the Lord. They were the pure devotee. This is that stage of pure devotional service when they're just constantly thinking of the Lord, constantly, without deviation. And so when devotees become completely engaged, completely saturated with love of God, this is Krishna can really just intervene and help and be present and really show those miracles in our lives. And one of the other qualities in Nectar of Devotion, that Krishna is ever fresh. Krishna is always remembered, and his name is always chanted by millions of devotees. But here's the thing, the devotees don't become saturated. So instead of becoming disinterested and thinking of Krishna and chanting his holy names, the devotees get newer and newer impetus to continue the process. So this is the ever fresh, right? So when we're chanting the holy name, it's not that we become tired of it, hopefully, right? That remembering Krishna, chanting the names of the Lord brings us always continuous peace, continuous cleansing. It continues to deepen our relationship. And so this is that ever fresh aspect where we are constantly, when we're constantly chanting the names of the Lord, we should also be constantly receiving some benefit from that. If we're chanting and actually thinking about the Lord, and we're not chanting with offenses. And so this is where the 10 offenses come in, of chanting the holy name. This is also where just having very directed, very focused chanting is really critical, because it helps keep the holy names ever fresh in our minds, that we are always obtaining benefit no matter what. So this is like I said, these stories in the verse today really illustrate for us how quickly the Lord can come to our assistance when it's necessary. And that's not to say that we put ourselves also in dangerous situations just because we're like, oh, the Lord will save me. So we have to so let's fast forward this to kind of today's world and today's life. We may say, oh, well, I'll just do this thing and Krishna will take care of me. And sometimes, someone will say to us, oh, it'll be okay. Krishna will take care of you. But we have to use our intelligence, right? And we can't put ourselves falsely into a precarious situation, thinking that the Lord will just always come and sweep us away and help us. So we have to be always thinking about what will please the Lord, always thinking about what will, we don't want to put the Lord out, right? Because the Draupadi was very, distressed because the Lord showed up. She was thinking of the Lord, but the Lord showed up and she was very distressed. She didn't want to put the Lord out. With the gopis and Krishna walking through the forest, they're so concerned. They're so concerned that his delicate feet might get, thorns in them. So these are, we don't want to put the Lord out. Don't want to inconvenience the Lord. And this is the mood of a pure devotee, is to not let the Lord have any inconvenience or suffering, because that's the love. It's not that we put ourselves in these precarious situations and say, oh, the Lord will figure it out, that we do things always thinking that we are surrendered to the Lord, but yet we have to continue to act according to doing the best things for our own spiritual advancement and for our own relationship with the Lord, which is not putting undue strain on that relationship, right? We start to take advantage of the relationship, that assuming that the Lord will just kind of pick us up. But then again, we can see miracles occur. And I'll tell you a sweet miracle that I witnessed with a devotee. And it was a really sweet thing. It was during a festival time, and he had to get a lot of things ready and dress the deities. And he was overwhelmed. He had gotten himself a little bit, hadn't eaten enough that day. He had gotten a bit behind, completely overwhelmed. And the devotees were coming for kirtan, at 6 o'clock. And he had gotten very, very behind in his day. And he was like, Krishna, I don't know how I'm going to get this done. And he was just frantically, and there was one calamity after another. He'd spilled some paint on the floor. He was trying to touch some things up, making the space beautiful, spilled some paint, another mishap happened, and he's still desperately trying to get the deities dressed. And there was a devotee who was traveling that day, and he arrived at the airport in Philadelphia, and he said to his wife, I need to go to see the deities. And, his wife said, well, we have to go home. There's so much traffic and we have a busy weekend. He said, I need to go now and see see the deities, see the Panchatattva. And so he showed up to find this devotee very overwhelmed and desperately trying to dress the devotees or dress the deities. And he showed up with plenty of time. And he said, let me just take a quick rinse and put on my dhoti. And he dressed the deities. And it was just, how could he have known? He just had this overwhelming feeling in that moment to just go there. How could he have known? And he arrived to a situation where he was desperately needed. So Krishna sent him. Krishna sent him there. And it's not that he gets off the plane every day with that exact, of course he desires to see the deities, but with that intense desire in that exact moment to go a specific place. And when he arrived, to arrive in such a situation that required assistance, because the people that were coming, they were newer, they weren't Brahmin initiated, they weren't going to be able to help dress the deities. And so it was just a really, and just another beautiful example of how Krishna is just all cognizant. He's all knowing when devotees are in a pinch, and they're trying so hard. They're trying so hard to please the Lord, and they just get themselves in a situation, or something happens, they just get in a situation and they're still trying to serve and push through it and serve and serve and serve. Draupadi still desperately was trying to figure out how she's going to feed 10,000 disciples. She was in a situation, and Krishna came and saved her. I truly in my heart, and this, I discussed it with these three devotees that were involved, and we all agreed Krishna intervened 100%. So, in fact, the devotee that showed up from the airport, he said, if you don't believe in God, let me tell you, he's like, I'm telling this story. He's like, how could you not believe in God after hearing this story? And I said, 100%. Who could doubt? How could anyone doubt, any existence of God by hearing that story? And so we know that Krishna, with his devotees, when he sees sincerity, when he sees that our heart is trying so desperately to do something for him and to please the devotees, Krishna performs, it seems seemingly like miracles can occur, but that's why I say we don't want to put ourselves in a situation assuming that Krishna will take care of it. It's really the sincerity of the activity of serving the Lord, not expecting to get into a situation, but maybe accidentally getting into a situation, that Krishna sees that sincerity of the service and sees the sincerity of the heart, and then intervenes or sends someone accordingly. And, I just look at it as Krishna seeing like this big, game board, and he sees the pieces like, okay, I have someone here that can go here, and I have someone here that can go here, and just helping to help the devotees out. And it's just, my husband and I, many years ago, we were on a cross-country road trip, and on our way out, we were in the middle of Ohio in like farm country, and we were getting very low on gas. So we had to stop off at this gas station, like in the middle of nowhere. It was just really very desolate. And we got off at this gas station, we walked in, and there was someone with their back to them, and they were wearing a dhoti and had a sika in the middle of Ohio. We're like, and so my husband's like, go ahead, say something. So I walked up to him, I said, Hare Krishna. And he turned around and was like, Hare Krishna. And he had just come from New Vrindavan, and he was on his way up to visit family in Chicago. So he was cutting through this across our path like this, our paths literally crossed for that very split second. And we explained to him we were on our way to California, and we had just had our Bhumi Puja festival in Philadelphia. So we had just broken ground to build the new temple. And so we said, we're on our way to go to San Jose. And he said, oh, my sister's in San Jose. I'm just coming from there. She had this big Indian wedding and she's not really religious. And I bought her this huge thing of sandalwood from India. And it was from, it's a beautiful piece of sandalwood. She's going to throw it out. And he's like, it was very expensive. And he said, you know what, can you get that sandalwood and just gift it to a temple? And he's like, just pick it up from her. I'll give you her information. So it's interesting. So he gives me her phone number, and he also calls my phone just to give me his phone number, but it didn't go through right. He gives me his sister's number. We get almost to California, call the sister's number. It's the wrong number. He gave us an old number. And we're like, oh, Krishna. And I said to my husband, like, we have to get this sandalwood. I was like, we'll take it back to Phil. Because I told him that our Philadelphia had just had Bhumi Puja. He's like, take it to your home temple, give it to them as a gift. We're like, we have to get this sandalwood. We have to get the sandalwood and bring it back. So I tried and tried. The phone number was wrong. And I was like, I don't know how to get it. I was like, he called my phone. So this was like 4 days later after we had intersected with him in Ohio. I went back through my call log, and sure enough, I saw a number I didn't recognize at that time when he called me from the gas station. So I called it and I got him on the phone. And I said, your sister's number is wrong. So he gave me another number. I called the sister, and we picked up the sandalwood, carried it all the way back across the country. We showed it to the temple president at the time. We're like, we have a gift, and he laughed and laughed and laughed. And he said, this is amazing. He said, I have been trying to figure out for weeks how I was going to get a block of sandalwood in time for Janmashtami. He's like, we have this tiny sliver of sandalwood and it wasn't enough. And he said, I've literally been making calls to figure out how we can get some sandalwood shipped in from India in enough time. And he just laughed. And we're like, here you are. There's this huge hunk of sandalwood that he had now that had been replaced and brought from India via San Jose, California, and a cross-country road trip by two clueless devotees who were Krishna's couriers in that exact moment. So, it's just kind of a funny thing how Krishna, even when we're completely dumb and clueless, like I am, I'm just like, okay, but Krishna can even still engage us, and we don't even know how we're being engaged. Imagine if we're actually conscious and, completely having a deep devotional relationship with the Lord, how much he can really engage us when we're sincere. So anyway, I'll just end with that story and open it up for any discussion. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Mother. Beautiful, beautiful class, and so many personal realizations and stories. It was wonderful. And as this verse is very powerful, showing how Krishna protects and saves and helps his devotees, is wonderful. And I really like the point where you mentioned, like, it's not that we test Krishna, let Krishna test us, not that we test Krishna. That is very important. Thank you so much for this wonderful class. So we'll open up for the question answers, any comments, and devotees, you can unmute. You can type on the chat box, or you can raise your hand and we can take some question answers. And I'm sure all...
Hare Krishna.
Yes, bro, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, we should step on the basis. It's all approach here, both.
Please accept mine.
Very nice classes, pastimes when you hear. It's funny, yesterday when the Gita was on, and there were some pastimes that she brought up, and there was a discussion about some people saying, well, we heard this pastime before, But actually, the pastimes are always so refreshing to hear. And especially, the context to which it is brought up. So now we heard two pastimes, one which was on here that Arjun was, reminiscing about how Dubas Muni saved them. How Dubas Muni would have put them in trouble, but Krishna saved them. Sorry, that's what I meant to say. And of the other one too, involving Amrish. And Amrish, this king his life is always a great reminder about how we should use the physical body, the parts of physical body, the senses, in serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's famous for that. And so by using and being very, very keen on serving the Lord at all times, then the Lord was also present when Durvas Muni could have caused his death. And so the lesson we learn is the Lord will protect us if we serve him with the best of our abilities. So that's that particular pastime is what gives me some sort of hope that I just should keep staying with the process, using as much of my senses, thinking about the Lord as much as possible, and the Lord will be there for me and for everybody. Hare Krishna. Just a comment. I didn't have a question.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. It's so true. I mean, I think when we serve with sincerity, it's not going to be perfect, but it's when we serve with that sincerity and the desire to grow in our service, to grow in our relationship with Krishna, he reciprocates. And I like, dear Krishna Prabhu said, it's not like we're trying to test him, we're not trying to challenge Krishna, like, you gonna get me out of this one? It's not about that. It's truly about the sincerely acting in a way that we were trying to act in a godly way, in a servitude way. And then, where Krishna comes in and saves us at the last minute, just like with Draupadi and the cloth. That's another example. Draupadi got into a couple of situations in her life. And another one is in the assembly where she was, being disrobed by the men, and Krishna, she finally cried out to Krishna and raised her hands. And, she was just like, Krishna, I don't know what to do. Just, and he helped her. So we have to be sincere. That's I think step one. Have faith and be sincere. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other devotees? I'm sure all of us must have some kind of mystical experience, if not many times, at least once. Anyone would like to share, or any mercy of God? Yes, Nitikopal Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Mataji, and all the
Hare Krishna.
Wonderful, wonderful class. Thank you so much for all nectarian pastimes and this first personal realization. That was so wonderful and so nice to hear how Lord has arranged, that meeting and coming back, Sandalwood to the temple. That's so nice. So I was just thinking on how Draupadi and other devotees have.
Prabhu, you are sounding little remote. Would you like to come a little closer to the mic? Maybe that might help. Or is it only me who is?
No, he's very quiet. I had to turn my volume all the way up.
Is this better?
Yeah,
Prabhu?
yeah, perfect.
Yes, that's a bit better,
Sorry,
Prabhu. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, I was thinking on how Draupadi and other devotees have the strong faith in the Lord. So how in our life can come that, how we can bring that faith in our life as like a growing devotee? What will help us to get that faith in our life?
It's a good question. Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. Excellent, beautiful question. Yeah, the first thing is to have faith. We have to associate with others that have faith, right? So this is a good step in the right direction, is that when we see others that have maybe a little bit more faith than we do, spend time with them. It just kind of rubs off, right? It's by faith by osmosis, right? It's just like when you're around someone that's joyful and happy, you start to feel joyful and happy yourself. And when you're around someone that has a deeper faith, then it's just that illustration of the faith that they have, then that it rubs off, the mood kind of can penetrate. And we can start to feel that as well. So that's one thing, is, that's sadhu sangha. And that's why that's so important in the processes of devotional service. And then, of course, we have our daily practice, right? Our sadhana, which is the japa. And japa, chanting our rounds, the more that we really put intention into chanting our rounds and not letting it be a mechanical daily practice, the more we put that deep intention into chanting, the more faith we will develop, because the chanting is a process of cleansing. It's a process of clearing our hearts and clearing our minds every day. So when we are clearing our hearts and minds, we will start to see that Krishna is in everything. And so when we start to see Krishna literally in everything and everywhere and in everyone, then that faith also begins to deepen. So we have processes that Prabhupada laid out to us. The main one is we chant, we associate with devotees. We keep ourselves clear by following the regulative principles of freedom. So we do these things that help very basic things to help keep us steady. And then as we continue to grow, we read, we meditate on the Lord, we think about the Lord in difficult times, and not be expecting the Lord to bail us out of difficult times, but think of the Lord in difficult times to say, Krishna, I know you're with me right now. And I know that no matter what I'm going through, that you're with me. And that these are things that I, from my reading, from my experience, from talking with other devotees, that I can share with you. And I welcome others to also contribute on ways to increase faith. Thank you, Prabhu. Good question.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Mataji. Yes, that definitely helped.
Thank you, Prabhu. Wonderful question.
Hare Krishna. Just piggyback, or even not even so much piggyback, but as you're trying to answer the question, Mataji, the point that you made that actually touched my heart is the remembrance and the faith that we have to have that Krishna is with us at all times, whatever we're going through. It's very, very, very sobering thought, and it's also a very important thought that would help increase our faith in the Lord. And of course, the pastimes that you talked about with Draupadi, depending on the Lord in two situations, when she could have been stripped naked, and then of course, in the situation with the Vasmuni, which you talked about today, also shows us so much the importance of having faith, strong faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And speaking about strong faith, it reminds me also of the letter that Srila Prabhupada wrote when he came to America. And we were saying that, I don't know why you brought me here, dear Lord, but there must be a reason that you brought me here. And he was saying that he was at the Lord's disposal as a puppet. But the one credit he gave himself was that he had strong faith. He had strong faith. And that is one thing that we need to, and of course, Nijigopapa asked a question about that. So important in our lives that Krishna, we have to remember that Krishna is able to solve all problems. And so when we are in his corner, to our own advantage, to stay in his corner and also have great faith in the Lord, that our lives will be actually tailored by him every step of the way. And this is for my own self-purification. I'm actually praying out loud and commenting like that, because it's really, really important, especially when the body gets old. And when you go through more changes to realize you have to rely on the Lord a whole lot more. Hare Krishna.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Prabhu, for that additional commentary. It's so true. Thank you. Good questions. Good comments.
Very nice discussion. And thank you, Prabhu, for adding more points. So it's 9:02. I know Mataji, you have to work. So if no more questions, no more comments, we can conclude the call for today. Thank you so much, Mother, for your time and your association this morning. Thank you, all the devotees. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Vanchakalpatarubhesha kripa sindhu vevacha patitanam pavnebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Mother.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.